General Jeff Sessions' public testimony before the Senate Intel Committee involved some testy exchanges, like one with Senator Angus King. He's an independent from Maine. He joins us now. Senator, great to see you.
Good morning, Allison.
Senator, let's start by playing back your exchange yesterday with Attorney General Sessions.
Has the president invoked executive privilege in the case of your testimony here today?
He has not.
Then what is the basis of your refusal to answer these questions?
Senator Kaine, the president has a constitutional...
I understand that, but the president hasn't asserted it.
Well,
you said you don't have the power to assert the power of executive privilege, so what is the legal basis for your refusal to answer these questions?
I am protecting the right of the president to assert it if he chooses, and there may be other privileges that could apply in this circumstance.
What did you think of that answer, Senator?
Well, it's hard to know what to make of it. He's asserting, I call it son of executive privilege or second cousin of executive privilege. I mean, the law is very clear. The president has to assert it. Jeff Sessions took an oath to tell us the truth. And if he wasn't going to tell us what he knew, then there had to be some privilege or some basis to do so, and it doesn't exist. He's inventing a new kind of prospective executive privilege that basically can get any administration off of any question, any administration witness off of any question. It was very unsatisfactory. I mean, our job is to try to get the facts, and you can't get the facts from witnesses if they won't answer the questions. And if they don't answer the questions, they got to have a legal reason to do so.
Yeah, I mean, it sounded like he was saying he was using possible future executive privilege that he wanted to protect his answers for. But what was the burning question or questions that you had that he did not answer?
Well, of course, the real question is, he said the president asked me to write a memo about Comey. And then I said, okay, you've testified as to that you had an interaction with the president. What else did he say? Did he say anything about the Russia investigation? And that's one of the real questions here is, was Comey fired because he was pushing the Russian investigation, or was he fired, as Jeff Sessions said, because of something he did last October? Mm-hmm. And those are the questions that Jeff Sessions didn't answer. The other question he didn't answer, I got to say, really, really disturbed me, and that is, have you looked into what the Russians did? Have you asked for any briefings? Do you understand the magnitude of what was done to us? And the answer was no. And Jim Comey essentially said the same thing last week about the president. He had 9 interactions with the president. The president never asked, what did the Russians do? How did they do it? How do you know they did it? And Allison, this is the most serious attack on our country since September 11th. An adversary is aiming an arrow at the heart of our democracy, and these folks are just shrugging it off and saying, you know, let's move on and talk about other issues. I understand their defensiveness on whether they were involved in it or not, but the fundamental story of what the Russians did and that they're still at it and will continue to be at it is just being ignored, and it really bothers me when the commander-in-chief takes that position.
So, Senator, how are you going to get answers? One of your colleagues in the House, Adam Schiff, says that he would consider going to court to, quote, pierce that privilege. Are you considering the same?
Well, I haven't gotten that far. We may have another session with Jeff Sessions behind closed doors. Maybe he'll be more forthcoming in that situation. I can tell you some of my colleagues yesterday cited a case of Eric Holder asserting this kind of executive privilege. But they did take Eric Holder to court, and he lost. The executive privilege was largely stricken. So that is an option. I don't see it necessarily at this point, but it may be there's a point in the investigation where we absolutely have to have this kind of information.
But all of that said, Senator, was there anything that Attorney General Sessions said yesterday that made you think that there was some sort of smoking gun? Because a lot of what he said sounded fairly innocuous about his meetings.
No, and I don't think, I mean, again, I think the only question involving Jeff Sessions is, what was the motivation for the president's firing of James Comey? And of course, the president himself, on 2 occasions, mentioned Russia. He mentioned it in his Lester Holt interview where he said, you know, in the back of my mind was this Russia thing. And then in the White House notes of the meeting with the Russian ambassador, he said, you know, I was under a lot of pressure. That Comey's a nut job. I fired him, and now the pressure's off. that certainly raises serious questions about, was the firing an effort to impede or derail the investigation? And we're going to have to get to the bottom of that. And Jeff Sessions didn't help us yesterday.
We only have 30 seconds left, but you know, Senator Tom Cotton, you heard his suggestion yesterday. I'll just paraphrase it for you. Basically, that it is wildly fantastical to think that among all of these bystanders and witnesses at some hotel that they were scheming about some sort of collusion between Russia to try to elect Donald Trump, and that that's just, it's beyond the pale for them. What do you say about the notion that you're creating fantastical scenarios?
Well, one of the most fantastical thing is the Russian government spending a year and a half to infiltrate and undermine our democratic process. I wouldn't have dreamed that that was going to happen a few years ago. We're living in a world where we have to consider those possibilities. Now, whether Jeff Sessions was involved in some kind of coordination, he says absolutely not. That may be the case. I'll let that testimony ride for now, but that doesn't eliminate Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Carter Page, and other people that we don't even know. We don't know whether there was any coordination. We do know what the Russians did, and we do know that it was intended to help the Trump campaign. Mm-hmm. We know that from the intelligence community without any doubt. And so the only open question, there are two open questions, is the investigation and whether there was some effort to derail the investigation.
Senator Angus King, thank you very much. Always nice to talk to you on New Day.
Thank you, Alice.
We have more.